Chris Good, welcome to the Science of Us.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Now, I wanted to start with a little bit about your background. You have been in architecture for about 15 years. I think it's over 15 years, actually. What made you get into that field in the first place? And maybe just a little bit of that background and context so the audience can understand a little bit more about you.
Sure. Well, at the risk of making myself feel really old, it's been over 20 years, which is hard to believe. And, I entered into the industry as an interior designer, but my passion for art is really what drove me in that direction. Ultimately, I think the thing that hooked me was this understanding and realization that physical space has such a huge impact on its relationship to people and how we experience the world around us. And I loved the idea that I could help shape what that looks like.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So this was something that you knew from pretty much early on. That was just what you wanted to do, and there was no other way forward.
Well, I'll say I'm super lucky in the sense that that passion for art saved my post high school career because I wasn't probably going very many places with the grades I had.
Okay.
Made my way into art school and just found this amazing passion for shaping the world around me. And thankfully that got me past that very difficult place in my childhood.
Yeah, very nice. And if we look at architecture itself, we're going to get a little bit about the references you made to physical space. But what is it, do you think, that architecture teaches us about ourselves and almost human behavior as well? Because it is closely linked to arts as well. I mean, there's got that design, the creative flair. What do you think it teaches us about who we are?
I think architecture and the built environment in general is really one of two things. It's either a barrier to the human experiences that we wish to have, or it's an accelerator of those experiences. And I think what I love at the core of that experience is that there really is only one real purpose for space, for architecture, for buildings. It's to support the people who live and work and heal and learn inside of them. And it's our job as the people who shape those experiences to do so in a way that feels special, that feels beautiful, and gives people meaning.
Is that a widely held belief, you think, around the industry, that that is truly what? Because it's, when you say it like that, it's so eloquently put and it makes so much sense. And it's actually the first time that I've got some friends that are really into architecture design. One of them is similar to you in the passion that he shares, but I've met others who don't ever talk about it in that context. So do you think it is more widely held, or is this a more unique belief to people that are truly, I guess, at one with the industry?
As an eternal optimist, I would hope that it is a widely held belief because there's so many of us out there shaping spaces. I know this is a complicated industry and there are many technical aspects. It's very easy to get drawn into just the technical side of things. But I hope that all of us at our core, we want to make sure spaces making people's lives better.
Yeah, and it's so true. I think this probably brings me on to my next point about where we spend a lot of time in space. Well, we have up until recently, is the workplace. So you're at one workplace now. I was doing a bit of research about you guys before, and I actually loved what I read. So if you would indulge me, I might read a little bit from what I gleaned about you. But you basically say you create spaces that inspire and transform, and you don't measure in square feet, but by the possibilities that you create, whether that's a better way to express unique culture, to a better way to work, to learn, or to heal. I love that. Absolutely love that. And I wanted to then use that as the basis to find out a little bit more about what one workplace does.
Well, I think something that I think at least makes us special, is that, at our core belief, we're not just creating spaces for anyone or for anything. We're doing so with the needs and experience of the customer that we're serving at the core of that value center. A project for one customer and one solution will be completely unique and special to another solution that we might create. We don't come with a specific vision or agenda. It's really to serve those people. And earlier when we talked about the relationship that's special between architecture and physical space and people's experience, if I were to turn that into an ask of you, and I were to say, I'd love for you to imagine a place in your life that was incredibly meaningful, and you closed your eyes and you thought about what that place would be, maybe it was a grandmother's house or a college dormitory or a place where you fell in love, you would envision that place deeply and have this very powerful emotion. And for most of the people that we shape space for, the workplaces, the schools, learning, the healthcare environments, uh, very few people imagine the place they work and the place they go to school as that really meaningful, powerful place, which I think creates an awesome opportunity, because that's a terrible, terrible shame. Those spaces that we spend all of our time, they should be incredibly meaningful places and spaces. I really believe they can be. And what I love about the team I have around me is they believe it too. And they're incredible people who are super talented, and they believe that they can shape space to make people's lives better, that that's what we're here to do. And through thought and through action, we can not just imagine those memorable and meaningful places, we can help create them.
And that's a really interesting point that you mentioned there. One of your other philosophies I see is that we're better together. And what do you believe? Like, so when you're talking about physical space here and playing in the role it can connect one another, I think you've talked about obviously the power that it has. How else does it bring out the best in humanity when you bring people together in the right conditions?
There's a word I fell in love with a few months ago. It's called propinquity, and it's
Wow.
this need for human beings. I'll say it again, propinquity. It's fun to even just say
Yep.
propinquity. And it's this need for human beings to form a connection with the people closest to them. It's just a natural behavior. It happens through proximity and through our affinity for each other. And we are absolutely social animals, and physical space is a chance for us to shape the way and form in which those connections happen. And if we can find a way through the spaces we live and work in to foster really great relationships through our proximity to each other, or through the frequency in which we can connect, or through the affinities and differences we share with each other, I think that's a powerful thing to have the ability to shape and to influence. And yeah, I think we absolutely are better together. There's so many organizations right now. I'm one of them, you are one of them, who are working remote because of these external factors that have sort of forced it upon us. Some were doing it before, but we're now all doing it. And when we come out of this, we're going to have to answer this question of, what do our workplaces even exist for? If I can do all of my work from this table in my kitchen, why do I need to be in an office? And I think the answer to that is because that's where we form those amazing, incredible connections with the people around us. That's what that place really should be for. We'll have to find a way to make that happen in a safe way, but that's what will bring us together.
And it's a good point that you mentioned. So we are obviously in a very different world. How for you as a company, when you are focused on physical spaces right now, how are you finding things based on what is happening around you?
It's changed everything. It's a scary moment. There are people whose lives are being affected by this. Their lives are at stake. The simple act of choosing to go to work is not only risking your own health and safety, but the safety and health of those around you, anyone you may cross paths or interact with. And physical places, they won't be the same ever again. But because of that, I think there's an amazing opportunity in that. The optimist in me comes back out, that this is an opportunity to solve for really big, massive change. All of the bureaucratic, logistical obstacles that have been in the way for really big momentum shifts in telemedicine and remote work and distance learning, it's gone. We can take hold of those things right now if we choose to do so in a positive way, and really incredibly shape the future. But from a purely business standpoint, this moment's tricky. We will certainly feel some short-term pain. Everything we do, everything we deliver, we can't right now, and that creates a difficult time period to get through. But on the backside of it, just an incredible opportunity. Uh, I shared with my team that maybe 2 weeks ago, as we went into shelter in place, or 3 weeks ago, they were feeling a lot of fear. They were worried. What does this mean for them? What does it mean for their careers? What does it mean for their jobs? What does it mean for their families? And I said, we'll help you get through that moment, but you have to realize that this may be the time when you do the most meaningful work of your entire career, because there'll never be an opportunity like this again to rethink everything. And so I hope we can do that, and do that in a way that is safe and connecting for everyone that will reshape space for.
I couldn't agree more that I think it is such a meaningful time right now because so many of us are being asked, well, forced really to slow down. And that's why you sort of see a lot of positives out there where people are saying for the first time, rather than me having to force it upon myself, it's being forced on me by somebody else, and I have no choice, and I can actually sit down and I know from a startup perspective, listening to some of the webinars out there, that they've been saying, look, this is time to double down on your product, get right on what you're doing, and make sure it is really meaningful for the people around you. One point you were mentioning there about, off the back of this will be a big opportunity. I think I wanted to drill into that a little bit further to say it's hard as well. I'm not going to ask you to look into a crystal ball and accurately predict the future, but what do you see, particularly from your industry? Where do you see those opportunities being created in the first place? Because obviously there will be a bit of a lagging effect for different industries. So where do you see it happening first?
The opportunities? The first is going to be a very gut reaction. It's going to be, we have to make space as safe as humanly possible right now. Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I've got to do with the physiological condition. People can't get sick when they come in the building. And it's going to actually be kind of scary, I think. We're going to be coming to workplaces where there's half as many chairs and everybody's walking in the same direction and everybody's washing their hands every time they touch anything. It's going to feel very strange. It's not going to be the workplace you remembered. It's not going to be the kind of workplace that you are hoping for the future.
Is it your sense that you think people will have this aversion to wanting to get too close to each other even after it anyway, despite the fact that if, there's a vaccine, everything's been sorted, will there be, you've obviously mentioned hand washing, will there be this fear, you think?
I do. I think it'll carry over for a while. I think you'll have two responses. You'll have people who the need to connect with people is so great they won't care, and they will just have to be with people, and they'll be very lax about it, and they'll probably stress out everybody else who's on the flip side of that the concern of getting sick is so great they won't come to the office, and they will only do so under some form of duress. And when they get there, they may not be as productive as normal because they'll be so worried about everything they're doing. We'll have to care for both of those worlds. It'll be hard. I don't know what the answer to that is, but that'll be certainly part of the condition.
Yeah, for sure. But then there are still, as you were saying before, there are still opportunities, though, in the way that it kind of starts with understanding human behavior anyway. Because I think one of the other points that you guys do, when I was just reading up about you, is that you have a lot of people that are normally involved in the projects you run out. So I see you had listed business strategists, designers, furniture construction, ancillary, audiovisual specialists, project managers. Kind of the list goes on. So you were obviously working with a lot of different people. And I was particularly interested in that business strategist part because that's where you're going beyond obviously what people would just say, oh, it's just designing a space that looks nice and all the rest of it. You're actually thinking about it so much further than that. So is there a lot of that going to come into play, particularly on that strategy side, for where the opportunities exist after this?
Absolutely. Most important work that we'll do in the coming weeks from here into the time that people move into space and even shortly thereafter will be this consulting work where we help people figure out for themselves what's the right solution for their organization, their team. There is no one way to fix this for everybody. Every organization, every building, every community will have their own way to responding to this. Something that we're really good at is helping to facilitate those conversations, to help them uncover that for themselves. And that will likely be a big part of our work going forward.
That's brilliant. I think it's with connection, as we do a bit of work with this, and particularly from a neuroscience point of view, but connection is such a fundamental part of human behavior. And I think that with the physical space, I'm one of these people. I know that that JC, our producer, is as well. That we are very much about wanting to, be around other people and to connect. There are great times when you can stay at home and, focus and get stuff done. But I think definitely more extroverted personalities will be relishing that chance to get back. For now, though, where we sit today, what are you seeing specifically about what we do well in person. So, what you've learned from everything that you've done for physical spaces. So, what can we take from that about what we do well in person, and how do we carry that over to the virtual world that we're in now?
Well, I think there's so many things about our in-person experience that carry over. It's really just a change in the medium, and at our root, people want to feel safe. They want to feel loved and connected. They want to do really good work. They want to be recognized, and that we can find ways to facilitate that in either experience. I think the hard part is there's a lot of parts of this virtual experience that are a lot it takes more time to do than our natural intuitive worlds would do. We don't bump into each other on the way to the restroom digitally, at least not yet. And until that happens, we've got to be super intentional about finding those connection points and making them happen. And that takes a lot of time and effort and energy. And so there may be a learning curve in that. Maybe we'll get so used to this it becomes more intuitive. But for the time being, it's definitely a little forced.
And I think that that point of being forced, something we've talked about within our company, is the fact that we have, I guess, people at the moment who are more open to connecting with other people. So going out there and sort of, creating their own groups. I guess what that leads to is you obviously don't want a siloed mentality where people create their own little clique groups that's all hidden because you can't actually see what else is going on. But we were talking about the interesting fact that it's not the same for everyone. So you may be one of these personalities that you find it easy, you haven't heard from anyone, be like, okay, well, I'll just reach out to Chris because I want to have a chat and, get one of those water cooler moments to talk about what we've been up to. But there are a lot of people out there that don't have that capability. They're sitting there, they're more introverted, they don't know how to approach that. So I think your point there about this being forced is going to be really interesting. And I don't know, is there anything, particularly if you look at that specific example, from a physical space point of view, did you ever come across this, particularly with your strategy element and everything else, to say how do we make something easier for the more introverted, and how do we create a more seamless way for people to connect?
Absolutely. I mean, every workplace that we have the chance to help shape, we're considering the individual work experience for every person and maybe their own desired work mode, as well as the fact that we all need many work modes in the course of any given day. Even the most introverted person needs to collaborate with others or needs to have individual time for focus. Something that we've been a big advocate of is designing spaces with really great alternative experiences for those places to go and encouraging organizations to push their teams away from an owned desk to go share those other places at many times across the day for many different times. A individual desk is a great thing. It has your name on it and you feel like you belong. I'm a part of the tribe and this is my place. But it's often a terrible place to focus, a terrible place to collaborate. Let's give people great places for those experiences, whether you're introverted or extroverted.
Yeah, it's so true because we often talk about that as well, about when you do just want to go and lock yourself away and have that even just hour worth of focus, but then you still like, obviously, yeah, exactly, but you still like the other stuff that can go on outside as well. It's particularly interesting with, and if we look at then what you were saying beforehand, we touched on it a little bit before about the post-COVID world. Do you see, so fundamentally, and I'm asking you to look into your crystal ball again, but do you see fundamentally smaller workplaces? Do you see a rise in more of the co-working shared? As you said, it's more about intercepting with people when they want that really strong connection. So what does it look like for you as a landscape of, I guess, the normal commercial versus now looking at the more, I guess, WeWork style scenario? Obviously, WeWork is a interesting word to use in different circles, but that sort of model in terms of the co-working space.
There's so many variables in the air right now that might shape that. I mean, if we develop herd immunity quickly, we may not make a lot of changes. It may look very similar to the world that we're used to. If we don't, and this hangs around for a long time, I absolutely see us moving to floor plates and spaces that are far more segmented, far more divided. Short-term lease spaces may become a larger part of an organization's real estate portfolio as they're avoiding 7,000 100,000 people campuses and moving people into these smaller, more distributed, specialized locations and places that are easier to control in this kind of, that's a weird way to say that. They're not really easier to control, but it's easier to separate what's happening.
Yeah.
I
And
don't know.
it's, I mean, I think it's, and that's why it's easy for me to ask the question, not have to answer it. But it's, I think that it will, particularly to your point about how long it goes on for and herd immunity versus, do we get the vaccine or not? I think it still comes back to what you were saying originally, though, is that the experience part will still be so, I mean, it'll be so much more important even than it is now because you're choosing to leave this little, confined space that you spend most of your time in and you want an experience to go out there. So when you do go and do that, it's going to be about satisfying a whole heap of new needs as well as old needs that we had as well.
And I think for a lot of individuals, when we get to this place where I'm deciding I'm going to leave this place, I'm going to go to the office. Something's got to compel me to go do that. Either it's the people there, and I'm going to go spend a really great experience with them. It's the the support that this place gives me, uh, and maybe it's partially that. Maybe it's also the sense of purpose and mission in my organization. If I really deeply believe in that mission, I'm a lot more likely to get in the car and to drive in. If I'm not, maybe I'm happy working from here.
Yeah.
It's going to be an interesting time for organizations to see how they culturally respond to this.
Yeah, and I think a lot of those are going through that challenge right now. Do you see the same sort of things we're talking about here from a workspace point of view, translating in retail, hospitality, other spaces as well? What do you see in that sort of area?
Man, well, retail was already almost killed by the internet, and very few things have allowed it to kind of hang on by probably a thread. This might do them in if they don't reinvent themselves. There really, at this point, will be no reason to go to a physical store unless I'm getting something there that I can't get in my next day delivery in a truck that I can order online from my bedroom. So I think retail is likely in for a huge rethink. Experience stores or who knows what, but they're going to have to create a real draw to pull people in.
Do you think people like Apple and some of the other leaders in that space will have to? Are you thinking they may even need to reinvent themselves, or is it just about extending on what they already have, and a lot of other people are going to have to come up to where they were?
I don't know. It might be little bits of both. From the experience side, that's something that someone like Apple's done really well within their stores. I mean, I know they're crowded and kind of crazy, but that's part of the experience. People go there to be a part of that kind of madness. Uh, I don't know if people will want to be a part of that madness shoulder to shoulder in this world. Maybe it's a different experience they'll want to create, but they're pretty good at the experience side already.
Yeah, true that. It's definitely going to be a very interesting world. I think that's why it's very hard to even talk about it right now because we're only into the, I guess, still defining what human behavior is actually going to look like, and it's going to be very interesting as we track as countries recover, as people go back, or what they actually then want off the back of that. So, but if we come back to the workplace, just to sort of summarize this really fascinating discussion on human behavior with physical versus virtual, you think that right now we have a very good opportunity to use the best parts of who we were, like the fact that we're better together, we can translate that to virtual, and that there are a lot of good opportunities coming off the back of this for physical space.
Absolutely, and I think the two places you're talking about is the physical space, architecture, environment, and virtual. Those two things are going to blend in ways that we never anticipated, because it's going to have to. We're going to be talking about human experience in a broad context going forward from here, and physical and virtual are just going to be two pieces of it. And organizations that figure out really good ways to blend that well, uh, for whether it's for their employees or for retail or for whatever experience, healthcare, they're going to be ahead of the curve because that's going to be the new norm.
A lot to a lot to look forward to. I think a lot to still figure out. But Chris, good. Thank you so much. It's been a very interesting insight, and I think that your last points there are very poignant about the virtual, the physical. I think it's going to be a very interesting road ahead. But Chris Good, thank you for coming on the Science of Us.
Tim, thank you so much. I really appreciated being here.